Think about the last time you walked through a parking lot. Maybe it was outside your grocery store or the pharmacy or your place of worship on a Sunday morning. You got out of the car, you started walking toward the entrance, and somewhere along the way, without planning to, without even fully noticing it, you let someone pass you. A younger person maybe. Or maybe even someone your own age who just seemed to be moving a little faster, a little more easily, a little more naturally than you felt like you were. You didn't say anything about it. You probably didn't even think about it for more than a second or two. You just kept walking, got where you were going, and moved on with your day. But here's the thing. That moment, that quiet, almost invisible shift in your pace, may be one of the most meaningful pieces of health information your body has produced in years, and almost nobody has ever told you to pay attention to it. Welcome to eVital Longevity. If you're new here, this is your home for honest, research-informed conversations about what it actually means to age well, not the version that gets sold to you in magazines, but the real, practical, everyday version that helps you stay strong, stay independent, and stay in charge of your own life for as long as possible. And today, we are talking about something that affects virtually every single person watching this video. Something so ordinary that most people walk right past it, literally, without ever realizing what it's quietly communicating. Your walking speed. Not your marathon pace, not your fitness level, not how many steps you get in a day, just the natural, everyday speed at which you move from one place to another when nobody is timing you and you're not trying to hurry. Researchers have been studying this for decades, and what they've found is, frankly, remarkable. The pace at which older adults naturally walk has been linked consistently across multiple large studies to how well the body is functioning as a whole. Not just the legs, not just cardiovascular fitness, but brain health, nervous system integrity, muscle quality, balance, recovery ability, and even how long people tend to remain independent later in life. We'll get into exactly why that connection exists a little later. And when we do, I think it's going to genuinely surprise you, because the reason has very little to do with fitness and everything to do with how your brain and body are communicating with each other beneath the surface. But first, I want to ask you something. Has your walking changed in the last few years? Not dramatically, maybe, but has it gotten a little slower, a little more deliberate? Do you find yourself taking your time on uneven pavement that you wouldn't have thought twice about before? Do you hold a little tighter to a shopping cart as you move through the store, not because you need it exactly, but because it's just there? If any of that landed somewhere familiar, stay with us. Because later in this video, we're going to walk you through a simple self-assessment you can do at home in about 60 seconds, no equipment, no doctor's visit, nothing to buy. That will give you a much clearer picture of exactly where you stand. And more importantly, we're going to share the specific, practical habits that research suggests can genuinely help, habits that take minutes a day, and that you can start before this video is even finished. This is not a story about what's going wrong. It's a story about a signal your body has been sending you all along, one that, once you understand it, puts something very powerful back in your hands. Let's start at the beginning. For most of us, walking is just something that happens. You decide to go somewhere, your legs carry you there, and that's about as much thought as it requires. It's the most natural thing in the world, something most of us have been doing since we were barely a year old. Which is exactly why what researchers discovered about walking speed came as such a surprise, even to many people inside the medical world. For years, the standard tools for assessing how well an older adult was aging focused on the usual suspects: blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, body weight. These are all genuinely important markers. Nobody is saying otherwise. But what a growing body of research began to reveal was that these markers, as useful as they are, were missing something. They were measuring the health of individual organs and systems. What they weren't measuring, what almost nothing in a routine checkup measures, is how well the body's systems are working together. how well they're coordinating, how efficiently the brain, the nervous system, the muscles, and the cardiovascular system are all talking to each other and executing a shared task in real time. And it turns out that walking, ordinary, everyday walking, is one of the most demanding coordination tasks the human body performs on a regular basis. Think about everything that has to happen, seamlessly and simultaneously, every time you take a step. Your brain has to plan the movement. Your eyes and inner ear have to feed it constant information about where you are in space. Your nervous system has to carry signals to dozens of muscles in your legs, hips, and core, timing their contraction and release with extraordinary precision. Your cardiovascular system has to deliver the oxygen those muscles need. And your body has to make hundreds of tiny micro-adjustments per second to keep you upright, moving forward and balanced. All of that for every single step. When all those systems are working well together, walking feels effortless. You don't think about it. When any part of that chain starts to slow down, lose precision, or lose efficiency, even slightly, one of the very first places it tends to show up is in how fast and how confidently you walk. Your walking speed, in other words, isn't just a fitness number. It's a window into how well your entire system is running. And that's what makes it so valuable as a signal and so worth understanding. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear about something important because I don't want this to feel alarming. A change in your walking speed does not mean something is terribly wrong. It does not mean you are in danger. And it absolutely does not mean that whatever is happening is permanent or beyond your ability to influence. What it does mean is worth understanding, though. And understanding it clearly is what turns a vague worry into something you can actually do something about. Research involving tens of thousands of older adults over multiple decades has found that people whose walking speed declines significantly with age 10 to face a higher risk of several specific outcomes. Falls are among the most significant. A slower, less confident gait is associated with reduced balance and reaction time. And falls, as most people over 60 are well aware, can have consequences that go far beyond the fall itself. Recovery from illness and surgery is another area where this shows up. People with stronger, faster, more confident walking patterns before a health event tend to bounce back more quickly afterward. Those whose movement was already compromised often find the recovery road longer and harder. And in some of the largest and longest studies in aging research, walking speed has emerged as one of the more consistent predictors of how long people remain independent, meaning able to live in their own home, manage their own daily tasks, and make their own decisions without requiring significant assistance from others. That last one is the one most people over 60 feel most deeply. Independence is not just a practical matter. It's a matter of identity, dignity, and quality of life. And the idea that something as simple and measurable as how fast you walk might be quietly reflecting the trajectory of that independence, that deserves our full attention. But here is what I really want you to hold on to right now. Every single one of those outcomes is connected to systems in your body that remain responsive and trainable at 60, 70, and 80 years old. This is not a one-way road, and we're going to show you exactly what that looks like in practice. First, though, let's clear up a common misunderstanding that stops a lot of people from taking this seriously. At this point, a perfectly reasonable thought might be occurring to you, something along the lines of, okay, but surely this is just about fitness. If I walk more or exercise more, my walking speed improves. What's the big insight here? And that's a fair question. It deserves a real answer. Yes, physical fitness plays a role in walking speed. Of course it does. But when researchers controlled for fitness level, when they compared people of similar cardiovascular health and physical activity, walking speed still predicted outcomes independently, which means something more than just fitness is being measured here. And that's where this gets genuinely interesting. Because what those studies kept pointing back to wasn't just how strong someone's legs were, or how good their cardiovascular fitness was. It was something deeper, something that connected strength, balance, coordination, brain function, and nervous system efficiency all at once. Understanding that connection is the key to understanding why some people's walking changes as they age while others seem to walk with the same confidence at 75 that they had at 55. And it's the key to understanding what, specifically, you can do about it. That piece, the explanation of what's really happening underneath, is what we're building toward. And once it clicks, the rest of this video is going to make complete sense. Not just intellectually, but personally, in a way that connects directly to what you're already experiencing in your own daily life. But before we get there, let's take a moment to clear up one of the most common assumptions people make about this topic, because getting this wrong can actually lead people away from the things that would help them most. The most common assumption people make when they first hear about walking speed as a health signal goes something like this. I've slowed down because I'm getting older, and getting older means slowing down. That's just how it works. It's inevitable. And here's the important correction. Aging does change the body. That part is true. But the degree to which those changes affect how you walk, how much slower you get, how much more cautious your steps become, how much your confidence on uneven ground shifts, that is not fixed. That is not predetermined. And that is absolutely not outside your ability to influence. Here's the distinction that matters. There are changes in the aging body that are largely structural, things like the gradual reduction in bone density, or the natural changes in joint cartilage over time. These are real, and they set a certain context for how we move. But the systems most directly connected to walking speed, the nerve pathways that carry signals from your brain to your legs, the muscle fibers that respond to those signals, the balance mechanisms in your inner ear and your ankle joints, the coordination patterns your brain uses to plan each step, these systems are adaptive. They respond to use. They respond to challenge. They respond to consistent, gentle, intentional effort in ways that can meaningfully improve function even later in life. What research in exercise science and gerontology has found repeatedly is that a significant portion of the walking speed decline seen in older adults is not purely the result of biological aging. It's the result of reduced use, of habits and movement patterns that gradually became smaller, less varied, and less demanding over time, not out of laziness, but out of caution, out of busy lives, out of the way modern life is set up. Which means a significant portion of it is also reversible. Not all of it. We want to be honest with you because you deserve honesty more than you deserve false promises, but more of it than most people have been told, and certainly enough to make a real, felt difference in daily life. Now let's talk about why. Because the science behind this is genuinely fascinating, and once you understand it, the practical recommendations later in this video are going to land very differently. When you walk, your brain is running what's sometimes described as a continuous, real-time program. It's monitoring your environment, planning where your foot will land 2 steps ahead, coordinating the firing sequence of dozens of muscle groups, processing balance feedback from your inner ear and the pressure sensors in the soles of your feet, and making continuous microcorrections to keep you upright and moving forward. This is not a simple process. It's one of the most neurologically complex things the human body does on a routine basis, which is part of why learning to walk as a toddler takes months of effort, and why, in later life, the efficiency of that same process becomes a meaningful window into how the nervous system is functioning overall. As we age, a few things begin to shift in this system. The speed at which nerve signals travel, what's called nerve conduction velocity, tends to decrease gradually. The connections between nerve cells in the brain, particularly in the regions that handle movement planning and coordination, can become less dense over time if they're not being regularly challenged and used. and certain muscle fibers, specifically the fast-twitch fibers responsible for quick, reactive movements like catching yourself before a fall, naturally decline in number and responsiveness with age. The result of all three of these changes happening together is a walking pattern that tends to become slower, slightly shorter in stride length, a little wider in stance for stability, and a little more hesitant in its timing. Not because the person is weaker in any simple sense, but because the entire communication system underlying movement has become a little less efficient, a little less precise, a little less confident in its own signals. Here is where the research becomes genuinely encouraging, and this is the part we really want you to hear clearly. All three of those systems remain trainable. Nerve pathway efficiency can be maintained and improved through regular, varied movement that challenges coordination. The brain regions governing movement planning respond to new motor challenges the way muscles respond to exercise. They adapt, they strengthen, they become more efficient with use. And muscle fiber quality, including fast-twitch fiber responsiveness, has been shown in multiple studies to improve meaningfully with specific types of movement training, even in people in their 70s and 80s. Your body is not finished adapting, not even close. Let's bring this out of the science and into a Tuesday afternoon. You're walking from the parking lot into your local grocery store, the same one you've been going to for years. The sliding doors open, and you head toward the produce section. Somewhere between the entrance and the bananas, you realize the floor has a slight slope you hadn't fully noticed before. You adjust without thinking, but your step slows slightly. Your hand reaches out toward the nearest cart rack, just briefly, before continuing on. Or maybe it's a Sunday morning. You're walking from your car into church, and someone you know calls out to you from across the lot. A few years ago, you might have quickened your pace toward them without a second thought. Today, you keep your pace steady, careful, measured, and wave instead. These are not dramatic moments. They don't feel like health events. They feel like Tuesday. They feel like Sunday. They feel like just the way things are now. But this is what gradual change in the walking system actually looks like in real life. It doesn't usually announce itself. It doesn't arrive with an alarm or a diagnosis. It filters in quietly through small adjustments, small hesitations, small choices that each seem entirely reasonable in the moment. And that, added together over months and years, can represent a meaningful shift in how freely and confidently a person moves through their own life. The reason this matters so much is the self-reinforcing nature of the cycle it creates. Less confident movement leads to smaller movement patterns. Smaller movement patterns mean less challenge to the nerve and muscle system. Less challenge means less adaptation, less maintenance, less resilience. And so, gradually, what began as a reasonable caution can become a limitation that feels, from the inside, like it was always inevitable. It wasn't, and it doesn't have to continue in that direction. Because the same cycle that works against you here can be reversed. The same adaptive responsiveness that gets quieter when you move less gets louder again when you move more intentionally. You just need to know what, specifically, to do, and that's exactly what comes next. Let's find out where you stand right now. This is called the 10-meter walk test, and a version of it is used by physical therapists and rehabilitation specialists to assess walking function in older adults. The home version we're sharing here is simplified, and it's meant for educational awareness only, not as a clinical measurement or a medical diagnosis. If you have any concerns about your mobility, your balance, or any recent changes in how you walk, please share them with your doctor or a qualified physical therapist who can assess you properly in person. That said, this is a simple, safe, and genuinely useful way to check in with yourself. Here's what you need. A clear, flat stretch of floor in your home. A hallway works perfectly. You need about 20 feet of open space, ideally more. And you need something to use as a timer. Your phone works perfectly. Here's how it works. Mark your start point and appoint approximately 10 normal walking steps ahead of you. Walk toward that endpoint at your normal, comfortable, everyday pace, not your trying to be fast pace, not your being careful because someone is watching pace. The pace you'd walk across your living room to answer the phone. Time how long it takes from when you start moving to when you pass your endpoint. Write that number down. Now, what does it mean? In research settings, a comfortable walking speed below a certain threshold, roughly, taking more than about 10 seconds to cover that distance at a relaxed pace, is associated with a pattern that specialists in aging consider worth monitoring more closely. But we want to be very careful here about how we frame this, because a single home test on a single day with no standardized measurement tools is not a diagnosis of anything. What this test is for is awareness, noticing, giving yourself a personal baseline so that in 6 months, after you've incorporated some of the habits we're about to share, you can test yourself again and actually see whether things have changed. The number on its own doesn't tell the full story. The direction of change tells a much more important one. Whatever your test showed, here is what we want you to take from it. If you felt confident, steady, and relatively quick, wonderful. That's a meaningful indicator that the systems underlying your walking are currently in good shape, and the habits we're about to share are exactly what will help you keep them that way. If you felt slower than you expected, or noticed some hesitation, or felt that your steps were shorter and more careful than they used to be, that information is valuable, not frightening. Valuable, because you are catching a signal early enough to do something meaningful about it. And if taking this test brought up some real concern, if you noticed something that felt like more than just a little slower, then please make that a conversation with your doctor at your next visit. Show them this test. Tell them you've been noticing changes in your walking. Any competent healthcare provider will take that seriously, and a proper assessment from a physical therapist specializing in older adult mobility can give you a genuinely clear picture and a genuinely specific plan. What we want to leave you with here is this. Awareness is not the same as alarm. Knowing something is always better than not knowing it, and what you do with the information is entirely within your control. Speaking of which, let's talk about exactly what you can do. Here's where everything we've covered becomes something you can actually use. And we want to be very straightforward with you about what the research actually supports, without overpromising and without underselling. There are 3 categories of movement that consistently show up in the research on maintaining and improving walking function in older adults. None of them require a gym. None of them require equipment you don't already own. And none of them require more than a few minutes a day to begin. The first is intentional walking with variation. Not just walking the same flat route at the same pace every day, but occasionally introducing gentle challenges that require the walking system to adapt. A slightly uneven surface like a gravel path or a gentle grass slope in a park. A route that includes a curb or two to step up and down. A pace that varies. A few seconds of slightly faster walking, then back to your natural pace, then slightly faster again. These small variations ask your nervous system to continuously recalibrate, which is exactly the kind of challenge that keeps nerve pathway efficiency sharp. The second is targeted balance work. Simple exercises that challenge your stability, standing near a wall or sturdy counter, and holding your balance on one foot for a few seconds at a time, or practicing slow, deliberate heel-to-toe walking along a straight line on your kitchen floor. These directly train the balance mechanisms that feed into confident, efficient walking, and they can be done safely with support nearby at whatever level is appropriate for you. The third is lower body strength work, specifically the muscles involved in the push-off phase of your stride. The calves, the glutes, and the muscles along the front of your thigh. Simple seated leg lifts, slow and controlled standing from a chair, or gentle calf raises while holding the back of a kitchen chair. These rebuild the muscular power that gives walking its forward momentum and its stability. None of these are complicated. All of them, done consistently and gently, can make a real and measurable difference. Research suggests that meaningful improvements in walking speed and stability can often be observed within 6 to 8 weeks of consistent, appropriate effort, sometimes sooner. As with anything new, start gently, listen to your body carefully, and distinguish between the normal muscle fatigue of effort and any sharp or persistent pain, which always deserves a conversation with a healthcare professional before continuing. Knowing what to do and actually doing it are two entirely different things. And we want to be honest about that gap, because it's where most good intentions go quiet. So rather than asking you to build a new routine from scratch, which is genuinely hard, regardless of your age, we want to show you how to attach these habits to things you're already doing every single day. If you have a morning cup of tea or coffee, that's 2 to 3 minutes right there. While it brews, stand at the kitchen counter and do your calf raises. 10 slow, controlled rises. 10 slow, controlled lowerings. That's it. If you watch the evening news or any regular television program, commercials are your signal. Every commercial break, stand up from your chair and sit back down slowly with control 3 or 4 times. That's your chair to stand strength work, built directly into something you're already doing. And on your next walk to the mailbox or across the parking lot to the pharmacy or through the garden, choose one stretch of it to walk just slightly more deliberately. A little more attention to your posture. A little more push off through your heel and toe. A little more presence in what your body is doing. Not for the whole walk, just one section of it. Small, consistent, intentional. That's the combination that research consistently supports. Not intensity, not perfection. Consistency done over time at a level that's right for you specifically. When you do these things for a few weeks and then retest yourself in that hallway with your phone timer, you may be surprised by what you find. And that surprise, that felt evidence of your own body responding, is often what turns a habit from something you're trying into something you simply do. There's something we want to say plainly now, because we think it matters as much as anything else in this video. The story you may have been quietly telling yourself, that slowing down is just part of getting older, that the way things are now is the way they'll continue to be, that the window for meaningful change is somehow behind you, that story is not supported by the evidence. Not even close. The research on human adaptability in later life is, in many ways, one of the most encouraging bodies of science that exists. The nervous system continues to form new connections in response to learning and challenge well into old age. Muscle tissue continues to respond to appropriate resistance and use. Balance mechanisms continue to improve with targeted practice. The brain regions responsible for movement planning continue to adapt. Your body is not a fixed asset that only depreciates from here. It is a living, responsive system that is listening for signals about what it's needed for, and that adjusts itself, as best it can, to meet those demands. At eVital Longevity, the thing we come back to again and again is this: aging is not the enemy. Inactivity is. Uninformed inactivity, especially the kind that happens not out of choice, but out of not knowing that things could be different. Now you know, and knowing changes everything about what's possible from here. We want you to try something for just a moment. Picture yourself 6 weeks from now. You're walking into that same grocery store, same parking lot, same sliding doors, but something is a little different. Your stride has a little more intention behind it. Your steps are a little more even, a little more sure. You're not gripping the cart quite as tightly, not because you decided not to, but because you simply don't need to as much. Picture a Sunday morning walk from your car into church, and your friend calls to you from across the lot. This time, you cover the distance between you a little more easily. The ground doesn't ask as much of your attention as it did before. Picture carrying your grocery bags from the car to the kitchen counter in one trip, not as a small victory you make note of, but as something you simply do, something you've started to expect from yourself again. These are not dramatic images. They're not extraordinary. They're ordinary, the ordinary moments of daily life that, when they feel easy and natural and safe, add up to something that matters enormously. They add up to freedom, to confidence, to the quiet, deeply felt knowledge that you are still moving through your own life on your own terms. That is what this is all about. Not a number on a test, not a statistic from a study. This, the grocery bags, the parking lot, the Sunday morning walk, that's what every bit of research we've discussed today is ultimately pointing toward, and that's what's waiting on the other side of a few minutes of intentional movement, a few times a week, starting now. You came into this video, perhaps, with a quiet observation you'd never quite put into words. A sense that your walking had changed, that your pace had shifted, that something was a little different than it used to be. And we hope that what you're leaving with is something much more useful than a worry. You're leaving with an understanding of why that change happens, and why it's not simply the inevitable, unstoppable result of aging. You're leaving with a simple way to check in with yourself at home. You're leaving with 3 specific, practical, research-informed habits that can genuinely help. And you're leaving with something more important than any of those things individually: the knowledge that your body is still listening, still adapting, still responding to the right signals. Your one action today, just one, is to walk across your hallway at your natural, easy pace, and simply notice it. Notice how your feet meet the floor. Notice your posture. Notice your confidence. You don't have to change anything yet. Just pay attention. Because awareness, as we said at the very beginning, is where everything meaningful starts. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you noticed changes in your walking over the past few years? Has anything helped you feel steadier or more confident on your feet? Share it below. Every conversation here at eVital Longevity is part of a bigger community of people choosing to age with intention, with information, and with hope. And your experience matters to every single person reading these comments. If this video helped you see something you hadn't seen before, please take a moment to like it. It helps us reach more people who need to hear exactly this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to eVital Longevity so you don't miss what's coming next. Because next time, we're going to talk about another signal your body has been quietly sending you, one that shows up not in how fast you walk, but in something you do every single night without realizing it matters nearly as much as it does. It's connected to everything we discussed today, and it may be the missing piece in why some people seem to age so much more easily than others. That's coming very soon, and we think you're going to want to be there for it. Until then, walk a little, move a little, and remember, the pace you set from here is still very much your own to decide. Take good care of yourself.